Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
We're on page 10 in your magazines, and today is May 4th. That's kind of an important date. And today we have two short news articles for you. The first one is entitled, Everest Waste Deposit Scheme Scrapped. That's kind of a mouthful. It's a very dense title. Everest is the place. Waste deposit is places where you put your waste. Scheme is a plan or a program. Scrapped means they've done away with it. Everest Waste Deposit Scheme Scrapped. So everybody knows Everest, Mount Everest. It's kind of the symbol of conquering nature where a lot of very ambitious climbers go. That's a life desire that they have, maybe a bucket list item. They want to climb Mount Everest. It's very, 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 very difficult and dangerous.
It's also very, very expensive and taxing on people unless they're been spending many years of their life preparing for the mountain climb. It famously was extremely challenging for those first climbers due to the lack of technology. But today, you could get a fairly fit person up to the top of the mountain if you have enough money, and you could pay your Sherpa, that's the people that live in that area, that's the nationality of people there, and they will get you up that mountain if you're willing to pay. But the problem is, what do you do with all that stuff once you're done eating it, consuming it, using it? Everest is sometimes called the world's tallest landfill because that's where you just keep all your garbage. There are tons and tons of waste up there. And what do you do with it? And they're trying to figure that out.
It's not just organic waste like paper wrappers. It's like oxygen tanks.
Well, oxygen tanks, interestingly, is one of the things they bring down because there's a very expensive deposit on them. And so let's say, bring this one down. But your drink packages, your paper packages, and if I'm being completely honest, human waste, that pee-pee poo-poo, is a major problem up there because it's so cold.
It freezes.
And are you going to be the person to take it down?
Dig it up and bring it down. There are too many things to bring down. So I understand that even though, like Chris says, those oxygen tanks have value, you still have to carry them back down, and you have lots of stuff to carry down.
Yes. There are some incredibly beautiful photos of Mount Everest, but there, at the same time, there are many kind of like, this is not what I want to see kind of pictures. Long lines ascending the peak, piles of garbage. So you mentioned earlier that this is the conquering of nature, but at the same time, doesn't it just kind of also symbolize in a way of just like excess and humans not living in harmony with nature?
Exactly. I totally agree. And what I think of first is you think you're really hot stuff for getting to the top. What about the people you mentioned, the Sherpas, the porters? They go up and down often.
Yeah, I think about them too. They really don't get the credit they deserve, including the first Sherpa ever to get to the top there. What's his name? Tunge. I'll remember his full name later, I'm sure. And he was like this handsome, charismatic person. And Sir Edmund Hillary gets up there first. And, and then everyone's like, hey, yeah, what about this Sherpa? Who cares? And he just kind of dies in obscurity.
That's right. They're not as human as we are. It doesn't matter as much, man. You got to kind of change your attitude.
Yeah, they really did kind of ignore these guys who were just like plowing up and down even then. Although I will say, it is remarkable that they do this so regularly, but this is so high and so dangerous. Even these professional mountain climbers whose biology has adapted to this incredibly light air, even they have to take frequent breaks. This is truly something difficult and something that requires a certain amount of skill.
I had an experience with very thin air in Tibet. I went on a tour there. I do not want to live in a place with thin air. Life is much, much, much more difficult that way. And watch out for these altitude sickness pills. Yeah, don't rely on those. Let's go to our article. Our title again is Everest Waste Deposit Scheme Scrapped. Nepal's government announced late last year that it had ended the 11-year waste deposit scheme on Mount Everest, admitting it failed to curb the mountain's growing trash problem. Under the scheme, climbers were required to pay a $4,000 deposit, which was refundable only if they carried down 8 kilograms of waste. The policy was meant to facilitate the removal of rubbish from the mountain.
In practice, however, most waste was collected from lower camps, while trash at higher altitudes remained untouched. With Everest estimated to contain around 50 tons of waste, the rule proved to be little more than an administrative burden.
Under a new plan, climbers will pay a non-refundable $4,000 cleanup fee, which Sherpa leaders say will create a dedicated fund for cleanup work and enforcement as part of a 5-year action plan. Man, I hope that works. We humans, we trash everywhere we go. Think of the ocean.
Yeah, that's right. There are those floating islands of garbage all over the ocean. They're massive and you could walk across them. And it's really sad when you see animals tangled up in them or animals consuming it because it's like, hey, it kind of looks like a jellyfish. Let me eat this. That's always really sad. So I read a number of articles about this, and people seem to kind of laugh and mock this, but I think they're doing the right thing. They tried for 11 years and say, this isn't working. We need to make a change. I personally have decided to applaud Nepal for saying, this is not working. We need a different approach. That's the right way to handle problems. What we planned is not working. Let's adjust. Let's come back and let's see if we could tackle this problem better. Personally, I am not mocking Nepal for this. I think they're doing the right thing.
Somebody mocked them for it?
Yeah, it seemed to be kind of laughed. Like, oh, what did you think people were going to do? Of course they were going to exploit this and only take the lower camp garbage. And you're right. People will try to take the path of least resistance, and they'll leave all the garbage at the higher parts of the mountain because it's so much harder to carry it, because the oxygen is so thin, because you have the lack of strength. And then we'll just collect 8 kilograms on those lower camps and take it down the mountain and get our $4,000. Yeah, people did exploit that, but that doesn't mean you can't readjust and you can't reframe it and you can't try again. I don't think Nepal should be mocked for this. I think this is a great approach to problem solving.
And it's totally fair that it's non-refundable. You're not cleaning up, okay, we're going to keep your money because we have to do the cleaning up ourselves. And it is very, very difficult. Yep. So back to our title, Everest Waste Deposit Scheme. Now pay attention to the stress. Waste deposit, and then we have another noun after that. Those two nouns are not stressed. So Everest Waste Deposit Scheme, scrapped. It's short for has been scrapped. That means it's been abolished. It's been done away with. Nepal's government announced late last year that it had ended the 11-year waste deposit scheme on Mount Everest, admitting it failed to curb the mountain's growing trash problem. So 11 years ago, they started this program because they could see that the trash was piling up and they had to do something about it. So they thought, okay, give me a deposit, bring down some trash. That should help reduce the amount of trash on Mount Everest. Then they found out the hole in the scheme and they exploited it like Chris was just explaining. And then they thought, we're going to have to change this because people are not taking trash down from where we really need it to be removed, high up on the mountain. So they thought, okay, enough is enough. Last year, they decided to change it. Our previous plan did not work.
So the word scheme is Latin for a diagram for like the position of the stars. It literally means like a map of the stars. And you can expand this word scheme into the word schematic. And if you are an engineer or a person that deals with buildings, you will know you will have those blueprints, those designs of the buildings. That's a schematic, and that's where you get this word scheme. Although, personally, when I see the word scheme, I often think of the word not plan, but plot.
Exactly. So scheme can be neutral. So here is a scheme for how we're going to carry out the project, but we think of schemers. Yeah, schemers and dealers, those are people who scam you.
Scheme and scam are related too. That SC is related here, and that's not an accident. So a scam and a scheme, these are plots to do something bad or nefarious or evil.
Yeah, that person is a real schemer. Watch out for them. They are trying to act nice to you, but actually they have other plans for you. Okay, the next sentence. Under the scheme, climbers were required to pay a $4,000 deposit, which was refundable only if they carried down 8 kilograms of waste. So we've just explained why that didn't work. They brought waste down from the lower levels, which were much easier on the climbers. The air was not quite as thin, so they just found waste from an easy place to get waste and brought it down. So the waste at the peak was not addressed.
That's right. And as Karen mentioned, that those oxygen tanks often come up, and so they have to pay a deposit on them. So people are going to naturally bring those down. And because they used and consumed them, they also count towards that 8 kilograms of waste. And so they were kind of double dipping a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember a scenario from my classroom. So I would ask kids to pick up a certain amount of trash to get out early so they could go have their break. And what I found is that people will always try to bend the rules no matter what. What I discovered the kids would do is they would pick up one piece of paper or something that someone left, and they would rip it into 2 or 3.
Look, 3 pieces of trash.
Teacher, look, you said 5 in here. Our 5, like, you took 1 and ripped it into 5 pieces. But so this reminded me that people will always try to get that easy path to bend a rule.
Watch out for the countability of trash. We do not say 1 trash, 2 trashes. I had a little icon on my computer once that said trashes. I thought, who wrote that software? So we don't say that. You say a piece of trash. Okay, several pieces of trash. The policy was meant to facilitate the removal of rubbish from the mountain. So now we've got several words we can use here. Waste is anything you're no longer using. Rubbish, things you really don't want, which is very similar to waste, but it's rubbish. It's something you are consciously throwing away. And then we've got trash, which is also similar. We also have the word garbage. Garbage usually implies something wet, like from the kitchen.
I also had the word litter and debris. Debris is spelled D-E-B-R-I-S, although debris oftentimes feels like maybe after a building has fallen down, you will have large chunks of concrete and rock. I also have junk, and we also have dross and refuse, if you really want to get obscure.
Right.
I also was thinking about synonyms of garbage.
Okay, so the policy had this intention. It was meant to. Remember that chunk. It was meant to. This was our intention. Facilitate means make it easier, help make it happen. Removal of, taking away. All right, next paragraph.
In practice, however, most waste was collected from lower camps, while trash at higher altitudes remained untouched.
And we've already explained that. So people just took the easy route, picked up the easy to collect and carry trash, and then the rest was not addressed.
This makes sense because at the summit of Everest, you have about 1/3 the atmospheric pressure of sea level. There's less air. That means you need to take 3 breaths on Everest that you would take at sea level. Now you have to carry all this extra trash and garbage. That's going to be a heavy backpack makes walking at sea level harder.
Right.
Now imagine you're in very thin air where you need to take 3 breaths where usually you would just take 1. And so, of course, people are going to look to try to bend the law a little bit to their favor.
One thing I learned at 4,000 meters in Tibet is you do not run. You do not run.
That's interesting.
You walk very slowly because you will soon be out of breath and you very likely will faint if you try to run.
Wow. So let's continue here with Everest, estimated to contain around 50 tons of waste. The rule proved to be little more than an administrative burden.
This makes me think of 2 things. One is the shocking number. A ton is a lot. 50 tons on what we hope is a pristine mountain, that is just utterly shocking. And that's what they're trying to do, is shock the reader. The other thing is an administrative burden. I have learned from committee work that when we have the power to make rules, we often make them very complicated because we have the power, and it would be ideal if we did it this way. It makes them very, very hard to carry out, and often they do more harm than good.
Yeah, so administrative burden is just government work, files you have to fill out, forms and papers. I don't think anybody truly enjoys this, but I think you're right that if people can make rules, the word is Byzantine, which means complex and difficult.
This is a big difference between 2 political parties in our home country.
Yes.
One side is trying to, for example, regulate pollution, which is a good thing. But sometimes they regulate too much,
right,
and the other side wants to get rid of the regulations, which means we're going to have more pollution. So you really need to find a middle ground. You cannot overdo it on either side.
Agreed.
Our last paragraph. Under a new plan, climbers will pay a non-refundable $4,000 cleanup fee, which Sherpa leaders say will create a dedicated fund for cleanup work and enforcement as part of a 5-year action plan. So they have had some terrible problems with this old program. So they drew up a new 5-year plan that addresses these things that didn't work. They're trying to do it better now.
I think this is a great example of self-interest outweighing the collective benefit.
Yeah, so we're going to have to think more about the collective benefit now because it hurts all of us.
Or how to weaponize the self-interest to the collective benefit.
Exactly. That's right. Let's move on to our next article. Repurposed EV batteries find a new role in Australia's energy shift. This is a really interesting title because when I think of batteries, I think of them running out of juice all the time. Because at my house, I have a lot of clocks. I'm constantly replacing batteries. The battery in my mouse, the battery for my keyboard. I mean, there's just batteries everywhere. And I try to get rechargeable batteries so I can just recharge them. Clocks need a special kind of battery that's not too powerful. So those I just have to use disposable batteries. So batteries are an issue. And I think of, look at all this toxic waste that I'm contributing to by all these battery-run appliances.
Batteries are a necessary evil of our environment if we are to transition away from fossil fuels, oils and gas and diesel. Then lithium and nickel and copper and mining and that kind of pollution will be part of our future. We are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. However, I think this is what our second article here is a great example of recycling and reusing. And I personally have a little bit of a personal story relating to this exact story. So
I'm looking forward to it. Here's our article. So repurposed means you found a new use for something. EV is an electric vehicle. Batteries that are used to power those vehicles, they find a new role, a new use in Australia, which is now initiating a shift in energy, what they are using as an energy source for many of the things that they use like cars. Demand for second-hand electric vehicle, EV, batteries has risen sharply in Australia, transforming the landscape of salvage auctions. Once largely ignored, written-off EVs now attract buyers primarily interested in their powerful lithium batteries. These batteries can be repurposed for solar storage, off-grid power systems, or temporary energy use at events like music festivals.
The auction house Pickles reports selling about 100 salvaged EVs monthly, with sales up 200% year on year. Specialists note that even batteries reduced to 70% capacity remain useful, offering quieter and cleaner alternatives to diesel generators.
Repurposed units are also seen as an important part of Australia's renewable energy transition. Experts believe these second-life batteries could continue operating for up to 20 years and help meet the country's growing need for short-term energy storage. Back to the beginning, demand for second-hand electric vehicle EV batteries has risen sharply in Australia, transforming the landscape of salvage auctions. That's a very dense sentence. I think the first thing you need to pay attention to is salvage auctions. Salvage means that something that probably would have been thrown away, we're going to grab it and see if we can use it a second time.
It literally means to save something from the garbage, or really its true usage is to save someone so they can go to heaven. You save their soul from the garbage pit of hell so they can go to heaven. Salvation meaning to go to heaven, and salvage meaning to save it from the garbage have that same S-A-L-V root.
Right, and then auction. Auction is an event where I have some things I want to sell, and I will sell them to the highest bidder.
We can also look at landscape here. This is not like the painting. This means like the current situation. It's transforming the situations that we may find at auctions in Australia.
And transforming is just changing something from one state to another. Our next sentence, once largely ignored, written-off EVs now attract buyers primarily interested in their powerful lithium batteries. Now, I will make a little confession here. I originally said lithium, and Chris said, you want to check that one? I've always heard it lithium, and that's correct. So the TH is voiceless, lithium. The second thing is written off. To write something off means to give up on something.
That's right. So this relates a little bit to our first article in an interesting way. We talked about trash or garbage, waste, litter, debris, and now we have something written off. And this isn't typically just considered as garbage. It's just a lost cause. We know we won't make money on this.
Okay, largely ignored means it's an issue, but most people don't seem to be paying attention to it.
If you don't know what lithium is and you know any chemistry, just look at the first two letters, and that's the pinyin for the character.
Excellent. These batteries can be repurposed for solar storage, off-grid power systems, or temporary energy use at events like music festivals. So these batteries are no longer strong enough for use in an electric vehicle, but they are good enough for other uses that don't have such high power demands. For example, one of them is solar storage. So you're collecting solar power. You have to put the solar power in a battery because when the sun goes away, it stops. So you want to save the power that you've collected from the sun. Off-grid power systems, that means you are not connected to the electrical system of your area. You are creating or you're bringing in your own power source like batteries, or temporary energy use at events like music festivals. You will hear a lot of noisy motors at music festivals.
Those diesel generators.
They're generating power that they use for the sound systems and the lights and everything.
Australia has a lot of remote locations, and people don't necessarily just live in those cities along the coast. So if you want to live on the interior, in that extremely hot interior of Australia, or on the other coast, typically you need to have some off-grid power, and this is an excellent source. And when I read this, I thought, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense to me. Like, this jumped out as that's an excellent solution for old EV batteries.
China has a tradition of going off-grid. There are a lot of people who get absolutely disgusted with the political situation, and they go live as a hermit in the mountain. Those would be ideal candidates for this solution.
You're exactly right. This is a great use of off-grid power. All right, our next paragraph begins, the auction house Pickles reports selling about 100 salvaged EVs monthly, with sales up 200% year on year. Now, this phrase year on year just means you compare this quarter or this month to the same month last year. So you're able to eliminate kind of the weird fluctuations like Christmas or whatever. You're able to compare kind of apples to apples. That's what this year on year phrase means. We have salvaged again, which we saw in the first paragraph. Make sure you're paying attention to that. That just means you saved it from the garbage heap.
My mouth is watering.
Pickles, I thought that's what jumped out of me in this sentence, too.
That's
Pickles
right.
Auction House?
It's the name of an auction house. My mouth was already watering, and then you were talking about comparing apples to apples, and then it starts dribbling down my chin. Okay.
Specialists note that even batteries reduced to 70% capacity remain useful, offering quieter and cleaner alternatives to diesel generators.
Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I read this article, I felt a strong surge of encouragement. I thought, oh, at least we're reducing waste somewhere.
Yeah, I thought that, honestly, it's great that they're able to use these batteries again. But I was struck that 70% is considered an extreme low for an electric vehicle. I owned a hybrid EV Honda Civic. That's right. And I got a great deal on it. And the dealer was also just extremely helpful to me. And he told me once this hits about, I think it was like 80% or 85%. It was quite higher than this number. He told me just bring it in and say it's not working anymore. And Honda, because they were trying to boost EV sales, would take out the old EV lithium battery and replace it with a brand new one. In fact, he encouraged me to do so because it would help my resale value. And when I left the United States, they actually the guy that sold me this car happily bought it back. He was really happy I came back to him.
Because he helped you maintain it in good shape.
And he was able to flip it for a good price again. He paid me a great value all the way through. I just want to give this guy a hug. He really did not try to screw me over.
I would call this enlightened self-interest.
I agree. And what struck me about this is that he was happy to take this old EV, but I found out what they did with it. I said, well, what do you do with the old batteries? He says, we scrap them.
Oh, no.
That's right. And so in the U.S., unfortunately, it sounds like this has not really begun to happen, but I imagine that with more electric vehicles getting on the road, that this is something we will begin to see more frequently. I'm sad my battery is probably in some scrap heap somewhere, but I'm very happy that other EVs won't meet the same fate.
Note the word diesel. You can still buy diesel fuel in gas stations. It's usually for like big trucks. Our last paragraph, repurposed units are also seen as an important part of Australia's renewable energy transition. This paragraph tells us that it's not just the batteries, but they have a whole policy and probably lots of programs under this policy to try to switch to renewable energy instead of relying on fossil fuels. Our next line, experts believe these second life batteries could continue operating for up to 20 years and help meet the country's growing need for short-term energy storage. I found that encouraging too.
I wrote, right after, at the end of the sentence, I wrote, great story, finally some good news.
Exactly, because it seems all bad with all this trash that we are constantly producing and not thinking of any way to process and reuse. Finally, some good news is right. Okay, try to reduce your waste. You can do it in a simple way. Just bring a thermos with you. Bring a bottle with you. Do not buy water in bottles. Do not buy coffee in paper cups. I had to this morning, but it's very rare. Use reusable containers. That's the first step.
It's an easy way to reduce your impact on the environment.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.